Are you chronically online? I've been a Quadeca fan since late 2021. I've watched the last 4 years as he's rapidly evolved and cemented his status in the internet music nerd base. In a way, it almost feels like I've grown alongside his music, as parasocial as it sounds. He is a product of the internet, and his rise is also largely because of the internet. I think it's interesting to see how his circumstances of how he's gone popular have influenced both his fan base and the discourse around him. Chapter 1. Quadeca and the Internet. Here's your typical artistic recap of Quadeca. Quadeca used to be a YouTube rapper who would make viral videos on hip-hop, such as his 10 styles of rap videos. Over time, he broke the curse of YouTube rap and fuck that shit. The framing of Quadeca as the guy that broke out of YouTube rap is reductive and continues to tack on the label of YouTube rapper to him. When even was his last YouTube video? Late 2021? That's over 4 years ago. His reaction video to Fantano's review on Scrapyard doesn't count, by the way. I also don't like the idea of Quadeca escaping being a YouTube rapper. He was a great YouTuber! I'd even argue that his YouTube channel displayed that he had a wide knowledge of music and knew how to market himself. These skills led to him successfully managing to find an audience for the music he makes now. When people talk about him escaping YouTube rap, they often compare him to current YouTube rappers such as KSI. Ironic. KSI released 3 proper albums from 2019 to 2021. He'd immediately gotten a major jumpstart to his music career because he was already famous when he started making music. This is obvious when you see the features on his sophomore album, such as Offset, Trippie Redd, and Lil Baby. Quadeca did not have this privilege. It's clear that he always had a passion for music and just used YouTube as a way to market it. Does the label of ex-YouTube rapper technically still apply to him? Yes, but I personally view him as a musician who also happened to make YouTube videos. Is the constant framing of Quadeca as ex-YouTube rapper and escaping the label of YouTube rapper a way of over-dramatizing discourse regarding his artistic transformation? I feel like some of Quadeca's fans who overly fixate on him escaping YouTube rap have a bias against rap as a genre. I'm not denying that it's cool that the guy that did KSI wound up making great, critically acclaimed music. However, I think that Quadeca himself would probably disagree with the narrative that YouTube rap was something he needed to escape. In an interview with Paper Mag in 2022, he says this: "You've been making videos for a long time and are one of the few to successfully be seen as a musician who also happens to have a YouTube career instead of the dreaded YouTube musician title. How did growing up in what you call the clout machine influence how you approach your music career?" Even though that is the common narrative, the first videos I ever uploaded were videos of me playing the keyboard and singing songs that I wrote when I was like 11. That's how I actually started, with Regina Spektor style piano ballads. So when people are like, oh, he's a YouTuber who's doing the YouTube musician thing, I get it, that's somewhat true. But I've always been doing music first. And it's scary. Middle schoolers are the meanest people on earth, and any insecurity that you have or vulnerability you show, they'll fucking destroy you. Quadeca also calls out narratives about him moving on from rap in this tweet. "I don't like convos I've seen around my album and the Yachty album. Let's start here. In recent times where people use them to demean rap as an art form, unexpected evolutions are very cool, but it shouldn't be implied that someone is an inherently more mature artist because they made something that isn't rap." Vulnerability is also something I think a lot of Quadeca's current persona is built on. The first real glimpse of that was with From Me to You, an album that is seen as the first good album of his by fans and critics alike. It's an album that is heavily rooted in the digital age. I cheekily refer to it as the white because the internet for this reason. Yeah, throw tomatoes at me, whatever, man. Look at all the online references in this album.
I'll admit that I'm insecure like my fucking track. Got more conspiracies for how I did it than fucking QAnon. And others refuse to acknowledge my music entirely. I call them Ben Shapiro. Okay, now this is epic.
There's also these lines from Smiling on the Ground.
I'm a fucking guilty pleasure. I'm like Jaden Smith to you. You'll never see me how I see me. I'm not an artist, and that's okay.
These lines always stood out to me, not because they are well written, they are extremely direct, but because of how much it showcases Quadeca's awareness of public perception of him at the time. Like Jaden Smith to you. Both Quadeca and Jaden Smith are children of the internet. Quadeca started his YouTube channel previously called Quadeca X8, which is funnily enough now the name of his label, on June 11th, 2012. He was 12. Jaden Smith had first started acting in 2006 when he was 8. Though the level of fame they had was drastically different, my point still remains. Additionally, this line also acknowledges Quadeca's worries regarding the perception of his music, that he's just a YouTube rapper to people, that he's chucked aside as a guilty pleasure because he's critically panned. I often see Quadeca criticized online for trying too hard to make critically acclaimed music. I think this past desire for artistic recognition was a defining part of both Voice Memos and even more so From Me to You. However, by the time he released I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, it's clear that he set himself free from those expectations on himself. He mentioned how he was going to himself when this album released, so he couldn't be asked about the discourse regarding it. Additionally, in this interview with Zach Sung about Vanisher, he also says this in regards to the recent internet narrative that he's trying to pander too hard to AOT and radio music.
Subconsciously, I don't go into it thinking, okay, now I'm gonna do the folk song and everyone's gonna love it. I'm like, what do I want to make today? What's the first little note or first little chord progression I played? What does that lead me to? And then I kind of follow the open-ended puzzle, because I think in a creative way that's not bound to, trying to satisfy a particular palette. I just kind of let myself go where it needs to go.
I'll be extremely honest. I think that whole point of discourse is extremely terminally online. Firstly, what's the alternative of trying to make music that you and other people will like? Why is that framed as a bad thing? Secondly, pander too much to AOT and read your music. Those sites are not that important. I'm getting a bit too mad over this. Maybe I should call a friend. Bro, I'm so sick of the narrative online that Quadeca is pandering to AOT and read your music nerds.
Bro, who the fuck is Quadeca and what the fuck is Rate Your Music and Album of the Year? Get off the internet.
Chapter 2. Quadeca fans and the internet. A large chunk of Quadeca's fanbase are online music nerds, more specifically, online album of the year music nerds. This is reflected in the differences in top album charts between AOT and radio music. I'll be focusing on AOT as I am not on radio music. If you don't care about AOT, skip to this timestamp where I talk about Quadeca's fans and the internet generally. I've seen a lot of people accuse AOT users of having a Quadeca bias, and yeah, right. However, I don't see anybody giving good reasons as to why that might be the case. It's because they grew up on his videos. No, that's assuming that all his current stans liked his YouTube channel back then. It's because their music taste isn't refined. No, that's extremely reductive. Surely there has to be an actual reason behind this, right? The start of his bias was Scrapyard. It marked the start of Quadeca's fans' heavy presence on the website, and the backlash from skeptics as a result of it. Then Blush by Kevin Abstract this year dropped, and the Quadeca songs on it were both the top rated ones on the album. Then Vanisher shot up the charts. I think you get my point. I don't necessarily think this bias is a bad thing. It's a natural consequence of online communities. Eventually, online spaces just recreate physical spaces. These music reviewing platforms will always be biased because humans are biased. I think it's much more interesting to understand why this may occur than have discourse about charts. I brought this up earlier, but Quadeca's collaborations on HIVEMIND likely led to this influx of fans on AOTY too. I'd rather not bring him up, but Brad Taste in Music was practically AOTY's poster child back then, and he was frequently on HIVEMIND too. People do overemphasize the size of AOTY though. I'd estimate that about 5% of Quadeca's fanbase is there. Additionally, his fanbase tends to be slightly younger, between the ages of 15 to 18 if I were to estimate. And younger people are also drawn to AOTY as opposed to radio music due to its much more updated UI. On a larger scale though, I think that most of Quadeca's fanbase is heavily online. I have my reasons as to why that's the case. Number 1, chronically online people tend to be isolated and be on the younger side. Quadeca's music is perfectly intertwined with coming of age narratives. Vanisher, Horizon Scraper is the best example of this coming of age theme for him. It's a story about trying to find purpose through sailing, escapism, and the consequences of your own impulses. I think the set of lines from Ruin My Life perfectly sums up his current music.
I was young, I was so certain. I thought that I would find one person. Still I am young, or so they tell me. All of the time, the world here to help.
It is a desire for connection as well as him grappling with growing up. It is the illusion of invulnerability all the time in the world here to help, which is often associated with youth. I also think that Quadeca and his music is extremely approachable. He makes music with this level of earnestness to it. It is awkward but in an endearing way. His ambitious artistic visions and the many worlds he builds with his albums give off the exact feeling of something you may randomly stumble on YouTube and get lost in. The awkwardness of Quadeca's music feels like a feature rather than a flaw. 2. Quadeca's music, post Voice Memos, fits into this indescribable genre-blending artsy camp. For a lack of a better term, I'll refer to it as Quadeca-core. He borrows influences from so many different sources that it becomes its own separate thing. From Me to You was a synthesis of maximalist hyperpop, glitch pop, Frank Ocean-isms. I Didn't Mean to Haunt You was a decaying folktronica album that Quadeca said that his inspirations range from FKA Twigs to Suosono Malone. It perfectly fits the recent shift away from a focus on specific genres and more hyper-specific soundscapes. Quadeca's label, X8 Music, also helps to foster a small network of artists, cementing an online community around him. Before that, Quadeca was signed to Dead Air, an emerging label releasing artists such as J Remover, Discourse, and Quantity. Of course, each artist is very distinct, but there's overlaps between online fan bases, which strengthens these connections. You're Quadeca and J Remover fan? Of course you are! Most of Quadeca's coverage online is a response to shifts in internet discussion. Back to the Quadeca escaping YouTube rap narrative, the start of conversations about his artistic potential drew in more fans, people that stumbled onto him because they saw him mentioned alongside Dax, wondering how Quadeca managed to wiggle his way out of the corny white rapper label. Though I do dislike these sorts of narratives, I can't deny that it provides a very impactful story. Chapter 3. Quadeca and his fanbase. I use the term heavily or chronically online to describe a large chunk of Quadeca's fanbase, as people tend to group together terminally online as a catch-all descriptor for behaviors and tastes that they think is a result of overindulgence in the internet. The internet is practically an open space, and there's so many communities on the internet that may never interact or know of one another. The 4chan addicted shut-in is a completely different archetype of terminally online than the fake mink, SD kid, niche, Instagram reels, and TikTok addict. There's a specific way that being terminally online warps your perception of the world, which is not present in Quadeca's fanbase. I see this from the jokes they make. Conker from HIVEMIND, where's Dax? Play beaming. Inside jokes at the time which were funny as they highlighted Quadeca's stark artistic progression. Off the henny, more fanbase specific from HIVEMIND. The sincerity of these jokes are different from other artists and fan bases that are classified as terminally online, such as JPEG Mafia. Quadeca's fan base is also extremely parasocial. He even says that too in the same Zach Sung interview I mentioned earlier.
Why are your fans so rabid?
Artists that self-produce just will naturally cultivate a more cultish fan base because you are hearing the music through an individual's lens in every facet. I think the fact that for my more recent music, I don't really feel like there's a lot of other places you could go to get what they do. I think when artists that are like that, people tend to be more cultish.
Remember how I said that Quadeca being awkward was a feature rather than a flaw? I think this parasociality is a result of that. Quadeca is just a guy. He has no crazy personality, no distinctive fashion style, no gimmicks. He's more like the average passionate music fan than an established artist. It's almost like he's a self-insert. Anyways, I don't necessarily see anything bad about his fan base other than them being slightly rabid, as Quadeca said in the earlier clip. I see this as a result of the fan base just heavily connecting with him and the music. It's not a crime to be slightly too passionate. Conclusion. Quadeca is in an extremely unique spot. When you put it all together, it's like watching a musician's personal growth throughout their life. His interest in building worlds around his albums almost feel like him trying to build safe places within his music. A detachment from himself where he can express feelings through a character. Originally, I planned on titling this video Quadeca versus the internet. The main point of that video was to examine the changing of discourse around his music, bad faith takes regarding it recently, and pessimistically attribute this to a lack of authenticity online and HIVEMIND. Pun intended! However, as I started writing that script, I felt strange positioning his career as a constant battle against online deception. It also felt really clickbaity and reminded me too much of YouTube drama videos. I doubt we'll have another artist like Quadeca, at least in terms of his artistic transformation. I think that's why so many people cling onto the ex-YouTube rapper narrative so much. It's interesting to ponder the idea of Dax randomly dropping a 20-minute post-rock song one day. In another interview with Papermag regarding Vanisher, Quadeca describes leaving YouTube as starting over. As he implies, his career is a string of fresh starts where he constantly redefines his own path. It's no wonder that so much of his music is about seizing control. Hope you liked the video. If you liked it, press a like. If you disliked it, feel free to dislike it and tell me why you disliked it in the comments. Subscribe if you want. As always, have a nice day.